Part 3 of our year-long mission to visit each location featured on a calendar during the month it is displayed takes us to Whitby Abbey, located on a bit of a hill overlooking the seaside town of Whitby. With us currently holed up near Leicester, the quickest route would be to take the M1 and the A1M up to York and follow the A46 to the North York Moors and then head to the coast. But that would be 2 hours of tedium, 30 minutes of mediocrity, and a half hour of good stuff. So we instead took inspiration from the Bikers Britain Motorcycle Route Guide. It looks like the author may be based in Leicester, as there are several routes which start and finish there, including one that leads us to, you guessed it, Whitby. We won't be following it exactly because we like to take things a little easier than the estimated times in the book would suggest, so instead we headed around Leicester and out through Grantham. We didn't record any of that leg of the run because it was a little bit boring, and unfortunately the camera we were using for this next section of the run stopped before we got anywhere interesting. We set off east from the McDonald's on the A52 until we reached the B6403, which is part of an old Roman road called Ermine Street, which ran from London through Lincoln and on to York. We'll return to this road a bit later on, but after being interrupted by the A17, we jumped on the A607 up past RAF Waddington on our way to Lincoln for our next stop. Annoyingly, as I say, the camera we were using only managed to capture us riding on a very straight bit of road, so it missed the moment that we rounded a corner to see Lincoln Cathedral looming down upon us from high up on its hill. We parked at the Castle Hill Pane display, which has dedicated motorbike parking spots and charges bikes £3 for the day. It's right outside the castle gates and is about a 30-second walk from the cathedral. We poked around the very impressive cathedral, which was the tallest building in the world in 1311 when it took the title from the Great Pyramid of Giza, until the spire collapsed in 1548 or 1549 depending on which website you're looking at. Still, that's almost 240 years of holding the record, and it was free to go inside, but they did have some special event going on towards the back and we didn't want to intrude. We grabbed some coffee from the Magna Carta pub, notable for being halfway between the cathedral and the castle, and named after the fact that the original copy of the 1215 Magna Carta is on display in the castle. At least I assume that's why it's named that anyway. I couldn't find much history on the pub, but that makes sense. One consideration of these trips is that my bike can only take E5 unleaded, so we have to plan carefully around that. There's no surefire way of finding this out, short of phoning specific petrol stations and asking them, but there is an app called Petrol Prices which allows you to search for stations that carry specific fuel types. Luckily, both Lincoln and Whitby have stations that sell E5, so that's jolly convenient for me, except that I have to pay more for fuel than Frey does, which is less convenient. After fueling up, we rejoined Ermine Street, now more commonly referred to as the A15, up to the M180 where it pauses before starting up again at the next junction. It then continues north over the Humber Bridge, which is a toll road but is free for motorcycles, and it wasn't too windy today. We took the A164 towards Beverley before following the A1035 before joining the B1248, which took us to our next break stop in Wetwang, which I picked out purely because of the name, and I feel no shame in admitting that. We'd hoped to make it in time for lunch at the Black Swan, but they closed up for a few hours after lunch. Luckily, the Deep Blue chip shop directly next door was open for business, so we got a quick bite there before reading about the Oswash Pond over the road. After that, it was back onto the B1248 towards Malton before picking up the A169 to Pickering. Shortly after Pickering, on the A169, we finally entered the North York Moors National Park. I had driven this road many years ago for work and was completely taken aback by the environment I unexpectedly found myself in, and I've wanted to go back ever since. The sun was trying to peek out from behind the clouds, but it was dry and there was minimal wind, and we managed to get around a big lorry before the roads got properly exciting. After making a mental note that an access road I had chickened out of in Ireland last year was less steep than the road into Slates, we climbed back up the other side of the hill and into the sunshine before riding into Whitby itself, and fueling up ready for the ride home the next day. We'd booked a night in the Endeavour pub overlooking the harbour, though I suppose most places overlook the harbour to some degree here. The pub is opposite the large Church Street car park, and Scarborough Council lets bikes park for free in any car space, which is just what we want to hear. We went for fish and chips at the Magpie Cafe before joining a ghost walk around the West Cliff before retiring to bed for the night. Overnight we were kept awake by the high winds and heavy rain, though luckily by morning it was bright sunshine, so much so that our bike covers were bone dry. After a hefty full English breakfast from the Singing Kettle, we loaded up the bikes and headed up the hill to the Abbey itself. This is an English heritage site and the car park is owned by the council, so again we could park for free, but it cost us £12.50 each to get in. I say it cost £12.50 each, but with it being an English heritage site, they don't half try and make you pay extra. You get grilled on what memberships you may or may not have, if you'd like to join, if you want a brochure or a guidebook or an audio guide or a season pass or whatever else they can flog you. Anyway, we eventually got in and found our spot, battling the high winds to stay upright while taking the picture. Full credit to Frey for this one, because I think she lined it up pretty much spot on, or as close as possible to get without low winds or a tripod anyway. The Abbey itself is rather spectacular in its ruined state, and it's amazing that it survived in this condition, being on top of a cliff overlooking the sea. There's also a museum attached which has some paintings of what it may have looked like intact, and various bits of stone carvings that have been found or fallen off over the years. The sun was out in force, but it was bringing the wind and all its mates with it, so the ride back over the moors was filled with nervous laughter for most of the way, especially when lorries went past us. In the interest of time, we decided to go home the boring way I described earlier, but we did pop into York for a quick lunch as we were practically going through it anyway. York isn't great for bike parking, with the big car park by the tower specifically forbidding bikes. There are street bays on Cumberland Street right next to the York Dungeon which are free. We got lucky and squeezed in at the end, and this was on a Wednesday in March, so in the summer on the weekends it must get tricky. I've linked the council website which highlights bike parking spots, but York clearly isn't a fan. This bay is in a very handy spot, but as I say, it's pretty small and it is on a hill, which might cause problems for people with heavier bikes. After York, we rode out and on to the M1 to take us home. Not the most exciting route home, but it got us there before dark and just in time for dinner. So, other than the stop in Lincoln, there wasn't much to see or experience until we got to the Humber, but after that it just kept getting more interesting until we hit the moors, which was the absolute highlight. The road gives you excellent views over all of Whitby in the distance too, and there's something oddly satisfying about seeing the road you're about to travel out in front of you. Next month is Padstow Harbour in Cornwall, which is a little bit further afield and will most likely require a fair bit of motorway riding if we only want to spend one night out. If for some reason you'd like to see that journey, please do subscribe to the channel and drop a like if you've made it this far in the video and you actually like it. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.